Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. How are we doing? Are we still celebrating Easter? The risen King? Amen. It's good to be here. Thank you guys for having me back. My name is Barbara, and this week we actually just wrapped up celebrating Easter at Google. Believe it or not, we have hundreds of employees gathering all around the world, from Singapore to London and a bunch of cities in between. And we had the privilege and honor to host events and gatherings. And one of the greatest things about shepherding that global movement at Google is really get to witness the same engineers that are building the AI that we're seeing today coming to prayer groups, coming to the Bible studies, asking the deeper questions. So praise God for that. And yes, I actually also work with the economics team, and I want to share a little bit about that. I have a short window today, but I just want to get to some snippets on that, and I'll get to it. Some photos from our celebrations over the last couple of weeks. We also celebrated Passover with our Jewish Googlers, our Juglers, and of course Easter. That's what they prefer to be called, our Juglers. A lot of celebration, but really good topics, really good discussion this week, right? And I know that we're talking about some uncertainty, so we'll get into that in a second. But before that, a quick, brief introduction to the Interbelief network. About 10 years ago, the Lord took me to Google, and He said, "Let's start something new." And so the Interbelief network is an employee resource group of communities at Google, where we create a safe space for communities of faith to bring themselves to work. We have about 10,000 members globally. For the Christians, we have about 4,000 Christian Googlers, and all around the world. We're more of a movement. You can think of us as a community of Christians who are bringing in the light of Jesus to work. Here's our mission and our vision. We are not supported by any external organizations. We don't have any partnerships with churches. We're an international, interdenominational movement of Christ at Google. Google has about 300 campuses globally, and so we're present, the Christians, in about just over 100 currently today. And we get to work on product inclusion. Product inclusion is what Google calls, in essence, gives us the opportunity to work on projects to advise leadership at Google to make sure that our products are inclusive to communities of faith. For example, Google Maps was one of the more recent additions that we've made. We added a feature to make sure that places of worship were also having an option. Instead of just business hours, we added a feature so they can include place of worship. And so just adding some features, and that's what we call product inclusion. That's an example of that. And we get a seat at the table. And I think the Lord has been moving in really beautiful and powerful ways. I know that there's been some heavy topics today, but I wanted to just bring some light into what God has been doing at Google. Like I said, I work with the economics team. I'm not an economist. I'm a program manager, but I definitely wanted to bring some important points to this talk and this conversation and really point you guys in the direction of what some of the top leading economists are discussing, some of the framework, how they're seeing AI implemented into today's world, and some of the topics that they're working on. The economics team works on global economic analysis, macroeconomics, antitrust, and causal inference, and more. I report directly to our chief economist at Google, Fabien Courtemolet, and he has some incredible interviews that are public and available to everybody, so I want to point you guys to that. You guys can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll post the links on there for you guys to. I 100% recommend listening in, and also recommend to actually read the papers that he's referencing, because a lot of these studies are really key to what we're seeing today and how AI is being implemented today, and his perspective on it, which is very insightful. So briefly, and I'll hand it over to Tyler for his perspective and his viewpoints. First of all, AI is already improving productivity. So economists love productivity. That's with growth in GDP. Productivity is what means growth without inflation. And so we definitely want more of that. And of course, some of the AI studies by Stanford and MIT already showing a 20% increase in just software development, writing tasks, and customer support output. But the key message that economists are sharing, not just economists from Google, but economists outside of the company, is that it's still really early. And I'm sure you've heard that all throughout the week. It's still very early on, so predictions are difficult. But the real story is really diffusion and adaptation. How are organizations adapting the technology today? And how quickly and how efficiently are we adapting the technology today? Not just big tech, but smaller organizations. How is the church responding to this? That's my question. And how it's getting implemented and how quickly. Historically, technologies like electricity, took many decades, of course, to actually see productivity and change. And that's because of adaptation, right? Organizations really take time to adapt to technology. So that's what we've seen in the past. Moving forward, of course, we'll have adaptation, but yeah, we want to see how quickly and how effectively the organizations are going to be adapting the technology. So that's the main topic. Jobs are changing shape. So here's some stats on the early adoption and diffusion. Economists are also talking about how jobs are changing. So AI, of course, each job is a set of tasks, and AI is taking over a percentage of tasks. What does it look like, and where does that leave us as humans and our input? And so really, the focus is going to be more on decision-making, and we're going to need a lot of wisdom, but the jobs are evolving just like they have in the past, and we want to start. So another example that was mentioned was spreadsheets. They didn't eliminate jobs, finance jobs, did they? They shifted them towards analysis and decision making. Search didn't eliminate research. It shifted it towards synthesis and judgment. And so that's what we're going to be seeing for roles today and moving forward with AI adaptation. A quote by Hal Varian, our previous chief economist: roles tend to evolve toward interpretation, communication, and leadership over time. So that's really important to keep in mind. Values are shifting as well. As AI handles more execution, the value shifts towards human judgment, discernment, and decision making. That's when I really think the church has an opportunity as believers. How do we plug into that? How do we pour in and teach wisdom to the future generations and create space for that, so that the jobs as they're evolving, as new jobs are created, a lot of new jobs will be created. I think we really can't imagine the types of jobs that will exist because of implementation. But as new jobs are being created, how is the church has an opportunity to pour in with wisdom. And so I think that should be a priority. Every church should have some sort of wisdom workshop for the next generations. So I hope that they take me on to that challenge. Another point is, and I don't have a slide for this one, but economists are thinking about how we're moving from risk to uncertainty, and that's the main topic today. Risk is when you know the possible outcomes and probabilities. We can measure risk, we can manage risk. Uncertainty is when we don't fully understand the structure and the foundation of what's coming, and that's where economists think that we are today with AI. There are some positive upside predictions as well with GDP predictions. Goldman Sachs talks about this, 10 to 15% growth to GDP. I mean, can you imagine 10 to 15% growth of GDP? That's massive. That's the type of growth that I think only with AI is possible. It's the type of shift that really changes industries, right? And so are we prepared for that? How is the church prepared for that? Now, of course, that's not guaranteed. It will really depend on the decisions that we make, what people are building with AI, what tools are being used, how the tools are being used. And so that's not guaranteed, but there is a potential of big growth. And so how will the church respond? I've been praying a lot about that and really excited to see what you guys come up with on how we can respond together. And I'll leave it at that. Hand it over to Tyler.
That was a great talk, right? So my name's Tyler Fischella. I was introed a little earlier, as you might have heard. I was working somewhere. No, I'm not. But me and Barbara do come in a pair, so you can intuit where I'm from. So I wanted to start this talk off with a little bit of humor. Who grew up with a grandma like me, who's kind of like a doomer, you know? Maybe you grew up with someone who would say these things at the dinner table, you know, when you're playing video games at night, or you're surfing the web. If any of this is something you also heard every day, then great. If not, that's okay. I want to recognize that a lot of people are nervous about AI because of headlines, because of what our grandparents said, and because of what's happening in the world today, right? And I want to draw attention to the real problem, not just the headlines and the noise, which kind of distract us from what we actually need to do. And one of those things is our calling, right? So when we think about development in AI, I think the question we have to ask ourselves when we're building things is, where do we found our biblical view in the calling? And where I like to go is 1 Thessalonians 5:21. What hast all things, hold fast to what is good. And I think that's a just position to the secular worldview, which is, well, those who control history control the future, right? If you control AI, then you control everything. So that's not what we want to do as Christians. We want to be building for curiosity. We want to be building for posterity. We want to be building for what is good. And where we are in the timeline is about here. AGI is more or less available in certain labs today. It's not really a matter of is it going to be, it's when are they going to let it out. So, and there's three points I want to touch on here, which brought us to today. There's three kind of timelines that brought us to this time of AGI, and then I'll jump into what I'm talking about with provenance. So the first timeline is the internet, provided by Robert Kahn and Vint Cerf. I actually had an opportunity to meet Vint when I was at the company. And he wrote a paper in 1988 called The Digital Library Project. And if you've ever heard of this, it actually outlines everything that you're seeing today. Back in 1988, the paper was published, and it was volume 1 of potentially multiple volumes. And in it actually talks about what are called the knowbots. And the knowbots are AI agents, or what we talk about as AI agents today. So if you're curious about where the future is, just read the paper. Artificial intelligence came about as this timeline evolved, right? And one of the most recent set of advantages were BERT in 2018, and that kind of kicked off new interest in AI, and then autonomous agents through Tor and Bruce. And the last part here is governance. So we've also been in a timeline of development around AI governance, right? Starting with Informatica back in 1998 or 1999. And most recently, a project I had the privilege of working on, which is Dataplex in 2022. We launched that product. It was a global data and AI catalog. I also wrote a paper, Structural and Belief in Meaning, to kind of understand the ontological backgrounds of AI and what meaning we can put in AI and how we determine belief systems in AI, because it's a really hard thing to do semantically and anthropologically, epistemologically. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of social science involved, and it's very challenging. So the opportunity I see for everyone that are Christians is figuring out this thing called provenance. And that relates to data governance. I'm actually going to skip that. So who knows what the word provenance is? Has anyone heard of that phrase before? Raise of hands. Oh, we do have. Okay, good. Yeah, that's good. Some people do. Okay, so provenance. Here's a digital example. So provenance, if we look at this picture, a digital artifact, we can know its origin through looking at the hosting platform which it's published on. Supposedly, we can know the user that published it, because hopefully the user has an ID. And we can determine if it was AI generated, if we know the source it was uploaded from, or we can't. And in today's age, actually, it's easier now to understand where things are coming from because of the new advancements in watermarking. The internet, and I'll end here, I guess the opportunity I'm going to get at is the internet. So we need to rethink the internet as Christians, as everyone in civilization, if we want to have it keep working. The original internet focused on perfect replicability, right? Universal editability, context modularity, and social exposure. So these are all positive things. We didn't really anticipate that the United States or that the world would enter in this like very multipolar, adversarial environment. I think that was not the assumption at the time the internet was launched in the 80s and 90s. And what we imagine the internet to be is more or less videos, images, plain text, right? Files, code, libraries, all in this World Wide Web, right? Thanks to Tim. And now there's much more underneath the hood, right? It's AI models, AI agents, apps, websites, platforms. And as the internet continues to grow, there's more adversarial activity on the internet. We have the dark web, which is pulling files from the public, manipulating them, pushing them back into the public, and then muddling everything, more or less, that is on the World Wide Web. And so we have a hard time defining what is true, what is actually historically accurate versus what has been made up. Memory is not something humans have in infinitude, and so we frequently forget what is true. And when we are in an environment, as the last speaker mentioned, not Barbara, but before that, when we're in an environment that makes remembering very challenging because everything's changing every day and there's no source of truth to actually be trusted, we can lose our identity and lose our way. And I think as a Christian, that's very, very terrifying. I worry about the day in which the internet becomes something other than it is, and we don't have access to the things that make us who we are. So I mentioned there's dual use problems, right? So what I mentioned earlier is infinite reproducibility. That's a positive, but now it's being used as a negative, right? There's an ease of manipulation aspect, context stripping, the liar dividend. All of these are problems that are being wrestled with in trust and safety divisions across various tech companies. And there are some solutions to this. Companies are deploying what we call auto moderation, or the internal term is auto raters. We have hardware level signaling, which allows us to cryptographically add things to sound and images so that we know where things come from if they've been brought about by our platform or another platform. Content credentials. So media will often carry a CPA metadata label. You can think of this as like just a small metadata annotation on the digital file itself, and then deep signal watermarking. And these technologies are good, but they're not universally applied, which is maybe a good thing. But they're not the answer. What people are now debating today as the answer is what keeps me up at night. A new version of TCP/IP. TCP, it's the root protocol of the internet, runs everything, if you're familiar with that. As I mentioned earlier, Bob invented this. Very smart people. And there are people now discussing a new version of this, which would be a model context protocol. So you can imagine that in the future, all traffic on the internet may be hosted and managed by AI agents, as opposed to web addresses or web apps or websites. There's metadata blockchains, which are being discussed all the time, which is exciting, but also terrifying, I think. And we have hardware and packet serialization, which is being done in an R&D setting in a lot of different labs, looking at how to rethink what kind of metadata or subcontext we can attach to packets as they're en route to different destinations. And the most interesting, I think, is the protocol wars. And this is what I was involved in. I was looking at protocols, analyzing protocols, looking at them, trying to understand which ones should be considered as good candidates for the next phase of the World Wide Web. And one of them I stumbled upon was called a PIC contract. So this is the author was Fabio. He doesn't work at the company. He was just someone I found on LinkedIn. Really interesting guy, cares a lot about provenance. And what he was talking about is building more or less a contract between agents that's open source. So AI agents can communicate and exchange information without having to rely on some sort of centralized authority. And I think this is interesting and potentially a good move forward, but there's not many other things to pull from. So what I'd ask all of you to think about is what kind of standards you want to see in the internet, what kind of environment you want to see information exist in, and whether you want provenance to be contextually core to that new environment, because today it is not. And it's a question to wrestle with. It's where we're going. It's the future. And then this is my shameless plugs, because as were mentioned earlier. So I have two requests also. If anybody here is interested in AI anthropology or digital anthropology, as I call it, please contact me. I'm writing a research paper that is focusing on kind of the ideological frameworks that these different tech CEOs use to make their decisions around AI. I'm also writing a paper, that's the same paper, that focuses on kind of how AI researchers are thinking about the dangers of AI. And then, as they mentioned, I am looking for my new adventure. So with that, I'll end my talk. I talked a little fast, but short time, and I hope that was useful. Cool.